In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to get started in an Airbnb business as a beginner from start to finish. And I'm going to talk right now about rental arbitrage because I think a lot of people don't know that term. And so let me make sure we understand it going into this video. The first thing you want to know is what is rental arbitrage? And that's just a fancy way, guys, of saying, hey, we don't have to buy a property. We can just rent a property from a landlord, get their permission with a signed addendum, and then we can take the property and put it on Airbnb. When I heard about this, I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. You mean I can just rent a property from a landlord and get their permission instead of actually going out and buying a property? Yes, Mike. And in 2016, my journey started. And I'm going to share with you the 10 steps right now that I did in order so you can do the same and be successful at building an empire in Airbnb. Now, here's what a lot of people ask me. When is a good time to start? And the answer is this. There are no real good times to start other than today. So whenever you're watching this, it's a good time. Because most people put things on the back burner because they never get started at all. But I will tell you that February is generally one of the better months to start because it's considered a slow season in Airbnb. What that means is usually the peak season is usually between March and December. Okay, that's called the peak season in Airbnb. So if you can get started in the slower season, you have that time to build up, to get ready, to get your property ready, and then you can crush it starting in March when we hit spring break. Okay? Step number one, and that is this. You got to learn from the right person. My mentor told me this, Mr. GC, okay? 10X, baby. He said to me this. You guys are online on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all these different platforms learning Airbnb from a bunch of different people. The more you learn, the more you earn. But you got to learn from the right person. What I mean by that is go deep with one person and just learn their tech. Everybody's got different techniques of doing this. Okay, I'm the #1 coach in Airbnb right now in America, and I will tell you this. I've seen things, heard things, I've solved the problems, and I've solved the two biggest problems that people have getting into this industry. Property and market research and getting a landlord to say yes. Okay, you gotta follow the right people you connect with, okay? So that's step number one. Number two is you just gotta create a name. Don't overthink this. Keep it simple, right? Your initials, stays, luxury stays, whatever. Your initials, luxury stays, LLC. Create a name, right? And then go to your Secretary of State and create the business, okay? Here in the state of Florida, we have what they call sunbiz.org, which is a website you go and make it so simple. Guy, third grader could literally do this, okay? So you go to your Secretary of State and you create an LLC, not a sole prop, not an S Corp, not a C Corp, an LLC. A lot of people are going to Wyoming right now and creating it there because it has a protection called anonymity, which means that your name, physical name, will not show up in public record. It only shows the business name. So a lot of Airbnbs are using Wyoming to create their LLC, and then they can operate in other businesses, what they call a foreign entity, which is a document that you basically submit. It's very simple, okay? Now, you're gonna then, once you create your name and create your business, why is that important? Because now we're legit. You move differently when it's not you personally. Now you're a legit business, right? And you're gonna move like a business, which means you're gonna move with a sense of urgency, okay? And now it just feels good, like I'm a business owner, okay? Start that process, then go to irs.gov and get your free EIN number, which is basically your social security number for your business. Then go to the bank and set up a business bank account by sending in, you just gotta bring your EIN number and your articles of organization, which they will email to you as soon as you start the business, LLC, okay? That's step two. Step three is you gotta pick a market, okay? Now, how do we pick a market? Well, just because you live in an area right now, does that mean that area is good for Airbnb? No or no? No, just because an area you live in doesn't necessarily mean it's a good area. And I think a lot of people get caught up in this. They say, I gotta have an Airbnb right there in my little zip code. That's a horrible way of thinking about this. Guys, you don't have to have an Airbnb anywhere near you. This is a remote business. As long as you have Wi-Fi on your cell phone, you can run this business from anywhere. So when I say pick a market, what I want you to do is I want you to pick an area that you probably would want to go to on vacation. The cool thing about this is being an Airbnb host also allows you to book a couple days for you and your family to go to your own Airbnb, and you don't have the expense of hotels or staying places because you can actually stay in your own Airbnb when you go there, okay? I'll tell you a couple good states: Florida, Texas, Arizona, Georgia. These are good Airbnb cities. They're very friendly Airbnb cities, okay? Tennessee, great one as well, okay? And I've got a list of bunch of different cities I'll share with you guys. But for the purpose of this video, I want to make sure that you guys understand that you don't have to be right there in your backyard, because right there in your backyard might not be a good market, okay? How do you check your market? Well, you can go to airdna.co, and you'll be able to get a free version to start with. Now, listen to what I'm Listen to what I'm telling you. Do not get into Airbnb without paid software. It's like getting into a car without brakes or getting into a plane knowing that it has no engine in there. It's disastrous. Don't do it. Get the paid version so you know that your numbers are not skewed. But anyway, when you get on AirDNA, you can check the market score. You want to make sure your market score is above 60. It ranks from 0 to 100. So you want above 60. Also, while you're checking the market on airdna.co, you want to make sure there are at least 250 active Airbnbers in that market. You don't want big cities like Miami, and you don't want small towns that have 8 people Airbnb there, okay? 3, you want to make sure that the occupancy rate is above 60% average for that city. And lastly, make sure that the average daily rate, called the ADR, for that city is above 150. Because if you are less than 150, you're going to compete with hotels, and you don't want to do that because they'll crush you because they've got better resources. Okay, so above 150 for the average daily rate. Once you have that, you've picked a market. Okay, now we have to really study the market, and the reason for that in this step is it's very important that we don't just pick a market just because we like the area. That's what I'm saying. Go to AirDNA, get that information, and then come back and have a decision like, okay, cool. I love the market. It fits what Mike just said, right? These speculations. And now we can go on to the next step, which is picking a single family house. The reason we want to pick a single family house and not an apartment, which some people teach, and it's so asinine when people do this. Go get an apartment. Yeah, what they're not telling you is that you have to have business credit. Most apartment complexes look for a PAYDEX score, which is created from your Dun & Bradstreet, the largest credit bureau on the business side of things. You create a PAYDEX score, which goes from 0 to 100. My job is to help you get to an 80. That's a benchmark. But if you're going to start there, make sure you have business credit already to get into an apartment, because they're going to ask for that. They're also going to ask for financials, and they're going to ask for probably some type of tax return. So if people are saying get into apartments first, make sure your personal credit and your business credit are on par first. I recommend, and this is the way I got started, get into a single family house first. It's much easier to pitch Johnny, who owns a house, or Susie, who owns a house, because they're not looking for business credit. They're not looking to make sure your PAYDEX score is an 80. They generally don't care if you've got your financials in place, okay? I figured this game out early. Just listen to what I'm saying. Go single family house first as your first rental Airbnb or a townhouse, but no condos or apartments to start with. We can always go there later and get into corporate leasing, okay? Now, next step is this. You got to do the math, okay? And this is why I told you don't get into Airbnb. And I will tell you this, the majority of people, over 80% of people, fail in their first year of Airbnb. Now, why do you think that is? I'm going to tell you. Property market research, pick the wrong property in the wrong market, and they just can't get a landlord to say yes for nothing because they have no credibility, no background, no Airbnbs, no references, no website, no credit, and it's disastrous. You're contacting a landlord to let you run a business essentially out of their property, and you've got zero credibility, right? So doing the numbers means this. You're going to use the software AirDNA, the same software I told you to do market research on. When you're on AirDNA, you are looking for a couple factors. The first factor is you want to make sure that the property brings in a minimum of 2 times the amount of rent. For example, if the rent payment is $2,000, I would like to see $4,000 average in guest revenue. That's how I know I have a good property. If the rent payment on the property I'm looking for is $1,500, I'd like to see $3,000 or higher in guest revenue. How do I know that? Because AirDNA gives us this data, and AirDNA scrapes data from my students and other Airbnbers in that area and says, how are they doing? And so it compiles an average of what